Welcome everyone to our webinar. Before we get started, a quick background about our company. Zenturo was incorporated in 2006 here in Malta, and our offices are located in Santa Venera, which is about 10 minutes from the capital of Valletta. Our staff speaks several languages, including English, of course, German, Italian, Spanish, Russian, and Chinese. But if you need another language, you can always find an interpreter. If you have any questions after the webinar, feel free to contact us by email, or you can call one of our office number or send us a text on WhatsApp, whichever you prefer. We work with several licensed immigration attorneys, and today's webinar will be held by Dr. Russell Attar Baldacchino. In your hands now, Dr. Attar.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. As per Anna's introduction, I'm one of the immigration attorneys licensed in Malta to assist with Malta's investment migration programs and the ancillary services. So through Zenturo and our partners, we also assist with transactions for property in Malta. And today, we're primarily going to be covering a number of points, but primarily related to investment in immovable property in Malta. So before we start off, I do want to move on to the next slide and give you a brief disclaimer. Whilst we are definitely doing our best to be completely accurate and provide you the best information possible in this webinar, please consider this as a presentation for informational purposes only, and it should not be considered as official legal, financial, or tax advice. However, should you wish professional advice, naturally, this is something that we could assist with further. So moving on to the next slide, we'll cover our agenda for today's webinar. The first is a brief overview about Malta. I understand that some of you might have not had the opportunity to visit yet. We'll then look at an overview of Malta's real estate market and some key practical matters that you would face when following such a transaction. Excuse me. And then we will also give an overview of the different primary regions of the Maltese Islands, which would probably be of interest when considering where to buy your property. In the run-up to the webinar, we have received some questions from yourselves and also existing individuals who are assisting that are relevant. So we will be covering such questions as well towards the end. So I guess we can go ahead and start. So I do apologize if any of you have joined our previous webinar, as there might be some repetition here, but obviously for the benefit of those joining today for the first time, we'll give a brief overview of Malta. So moving on to the next slide. The first point to mention, bear with me, the slide, there we are. So let's start with Malta's location. So Malta is located centrally between the south of Europe, former part of Europe, and just north of the north of Africa. So you can easily get to Italy, Sicily, mainland Europe, literally in a flight that could vary from around less than an hour up to around 3 hours. You can get to most of Europe. Air links are very well connected, so even despite the global crises that we've been seeing with COVID and also currently, Malta has excellently connected air routes, so it's very easy to get to Malta and get back to wherever you need to be. So the population is reflective of our size. So Malta is a very small jurisdiction in terms of its landmass, and this is reflected in its population, which currently stands at around 500,000 people. The curiosity here, or the interesting point to note, is that in pre-COVID conditions, Malta would receive around 2.5 million tourists annually, so roughly 5 times its population. Naturally, with the situation at the moment, we are not seeing such numbers, but I'm confident that this will improve as the global situation also improves. Now, a good thing about Malta that you might not get in other European jurisdictions is the language. Malta has both Maltese and English as its official languages, and that pretty much means that anyone you meet in Malta, or Maltese people you meet in Malta, are going to be able to speak English and Maltese. So if you do intend on living here and potentially studying here or sending your kids to school over here, this is definitely going to be a big plus. Furthermore, the programs for immigration in Malta, if you're looking at a residency program or a citizenship by investment program, English or Maltese are not actual requirements. So you do not be wary if this is a concern for you or any of your family members. Now, when looking at a jurisdiction to move to, one of the main things to consider is the cost of living. Being a European jurisdiction, the cost of living is quite attractive. You could get by in Malta easily on a minimum budget of 1,000 to 2,000 euro per month. Obviously, there is the possibility to spend much more than that, depending on how the lifestyle you choose. But the bottom line is that if you don't want to spend too much and live a basic lifestyle, you don't need too much in order to live here or possibly retire here. So other questions we received that is also connected to Malta and obviously definitely relevant is what is Malta like? So how developed is it? What's the eating out? How is that like? I mean, is there nature we can enjoy? So the good thing about Malta is that you have basically pretty much everything you want within a 20-minute drive or distance. Because if you want to go to a restaurant, Malta has around 670 restaurants, meaning you could try a different one every day for the next 2 years. We have a good entertainment industry. So if you like the theater, arts and culture, the cinema, or sports activities, you can definitely participate in that over here. At the same time, if you want to take it a bit more of a laid-back approach and enjoy nature and the beaches, you also get that in Malta as well. So you could consider it as, or compare it to, let's say, something like the south of France or potentially another European city. The difference is we're an island. So we're surrounded by sea and we do have a small landmass, meaning everything is pretty much close by when you need it. So moving on to the next slide, and now we'll shift our focus more on the technicals and maybe practical aspects of acquiring property in Malta. First and foremost, I mean, when you're thinking of acquiring a property, one of the main things to consider is the stability of that market and the jurisdiction's economy. So if we had to look at the historic property price index for Malta, the numbers are quite good. And as I mentioned earlier, even despite certain global crises, if you look at the history, the property price has always been resilient. And although slight dips may have been experienced, there is a very, very prompt recovery and further growth. So the fact that Malta is small and land and property is limited is obviously going to help to ensure that the prices are more stable than other jurisdictions where obviously they just have more space to continue developing. Now, so let's say you've looked at the Maltese economy, you feel comfortable with it and you like it. What's the next step? Are you eligible and what can you buy? So the good thing here is that eligibility is pretty much open for all, obviously subject to affordability and due diligence and all the checks and measures in place. The main thing you'd want to consider is whether you want to buy a property in a special designated area or outside of a special designated area, and which I shall refer to as SDA. So if you purchase a property in an SDA, this basically means that you don't need a permit to buy it, you don't need to buy it as your residential property, and you are free to rent it out without any restriction. Special designated areas or SDAs are set out at law and normally consist of developments which are upcoming and quite trendy that foreign investors would want to get into. So we will actually be covering a good range of this type of property later on in the presentation. However, I do want to point out that there is still the possibility of purchasing any other property in Malta outside of an SDA. However, certain limitations or restrictions will apply. Firstly, if the property you buy is outside of an SDA, you're going to have to purchase it under an acquisition of immovable property permit. So we've referred to this as an AIP. So this AIP is very much a formality or an administrative procedure. However, it does place obligations on the buyer. So if you purchase with an AIP, as opposed to purchasing a property in an SDA, the difference is you must purchase the property as your sole residential property in Malta. And consequently, this means that you are not permitted to rent out this property since it is the property you should be living in. Therefore, if your intention is to purchase a property in Malta, to live in it and use it as your second home, then it doesn't really make a difference whether you purchase in an SDA or a non-SDA. On the other hand, if your intention is to enter the property market in Malta for rental purposes, then you don't really have a choice apart from special designated areas, because that is going to allow you to purchase as many units as you like, and you can rent them out without restrictions. So for the purposes of practicality, when I do go over properties later on in today's presentation, it will be limited to properties that we've selected from SDAs. And the reason of this is because even when it comes to the purchase process, which is the next point on our slide, it could be easier and more efficient to purchase a property in an SDA. So, no, sorry, the next point on the slide, but the same slide. So, in terms of the purchase process, how does it work? So you like Malta, you found the property you want, and you want to move forward. It's quite an easy process. In terms of the procedure, we would set up a meeting with a notary that ultimately will be of your choice. A promise of sale will be signed, which would be subject to certain conditions before the final deed would be executed. And upon signing of this promise of sale, you will have to pay a deposit, normally around 10% of the purchase price, and you would also pay part of the tax that is due for this purchase. I'll get into the specific figures later on in the same session and slide. So once you've signed the promise of sale, you've paid that deposit, you've paid the provisional tax, what happens next? So the notary must conduct the searches just to ensure the seller does have actual title over that property. So it's to safeguard your interests. If you are purchasing outside of an SDA, the notary will also assist with that process to acquire that permit. And this is why I mentioned an SDA purchase might be easier, because in an SDA purchase, you avoid the requirement of that application process, and that could therefore reduce the chance of delays in the process. So the next thing that would need to be done once the notary is conducting the searches and, if necessary, applying for your permit, there is the due diligence process on the source of funds. So under anti-money laundering regulations, all parties in the transaction effectively are required to make sure that the funds being used for the transaction are legitimately sourced. So again, depending on how straightforward it is to prove the source of your funds, obviously that is going to make the process more efficient. Roughly, if I had to give a timeline, assuming all conditions are ideal and there are no delays and there's no financing involved, you could finalize a property purchase in anything between 4 to 6 months. Depending on complexities, it may take slightly longer than that. However, if everything is in order, I don't see any reason why it should extend beyond the 6 months. Now, the point of financing is one that we get asked about a lot. Unfortunately, we've spoken to some financing institutions. However, we do not currently have any options for financing available. And I could say this is pretty much the case throughout Malta. So there's no financing options available in Malta. However, if you have the possibility for a remortgage your property in your country of origin, definitely nothing will prevent you from taking out the financing overseas and then using that financing to acquire the property in Malta. So yes, you can use financing. However, unfortunately, it is not something that you could take advantage of from a Maltese financial institution. Now, once you've completed the process, there's going to be another payment trigger. So naturally, let's say the promise of sale has been signed, the searches are conducted by the notary. If needed, the permit is acquired, and also we're assuming the due diligence and the AML has been completed and the source of funds have all been verified. At that point, we then can move and proceed towards the signing or execution of the final deed. So again, we'd have another meeting, documents will be signed, and at that point, the purchaser will then have to transfer the outstanding balance for the property purchase price and also pay the outstanding tax. And that takes us to the next point. So what are the taxes and fees applicable? When buying your property, the good thing is that you incur less taxes or fees as compared to when you are selling your property. So when you purchase a property, you're going to pay a flat rate of 5% tax, and that stops there. You will pay 1% of that tax upon signing the promise of sale, and the other 4% of the tax upon signing of the final deed. In terms of other fees, if there's an agent involved, then yes, then the good thing is that the agency fees are actually paid for by the seller. So you don't directly make any payments to the agent for their services, even if it was the agent that had found the property for you. And apart from that, there's no other mandatory fees or costs. Naturally, if you do take out any other services, such as the option to engage an architect to check the structure of the property, or if you want to get somebody to check the plumbing system, if you are not able to be present yourself and wish to appoint somebody to represent you for the signing of the promise of sale, the deed, or possibly both, then of course, there may be other costs involved. However, the bare minimum is the payment of the tax and the payment of the purchase value. Now, things change a bit when you come to sell the property. So if you sell it through an agent, then the agent fees are going to be covered have to be covered by the seller. And then if you sell the property within 5 years of purchasing it, you are going to incur a tax of 5%. If you sell the property after 5 years of acquiring it, then the tax payable will be 8%. So in reality, one does need to keep in mind that these are the current rates of tax, and later on down the line, these could be subject to changes. So if you do purchase a property next year and decide to sell it 5 or 7 years down the line, there is a possibility the tax rates could be different. That being said, historically, there haven't been any drastic variations, so you could expect to have this stability on the tax rates. The best point of it all when it comes to taxes is that unlike certain jurisdictions, Malta does not impose a property holding tax. So if you are holding onto your property and you do not sell it, you are not paying any annual taxes. The annual fees that you could expect to cover are limited mainly to any condominium or common area fees. But then again, these are very minimal. If you're looking at an apartment that costs something in the region of 300 to 500,000 euro, the annual maintenance fees could be a few €100 per year. And naturally, if you go for a higher end property in a 1 million, 2 million plus, then the annual common fees could start off at 1,000, 2,000 and upwards. So again, that being said, it would still be reasonable in relation to the property value, and those fees paid will be used for the maintenance and improvement of the complex which your apartment forms part of. Okay, so that's a pretty brief and concise overview of the stages or the points that you will need to deal with in terms of the process of acquiring property. Now we'll move on to the next slide, and here we'll take a look at the first region that we will be highlighting, and this region is most probably the preference for individuals who are in Malta for the first time. So this is the Central Harbour region. This is where most of the stuff is happening in Malta. You've got Valletta, the capital. You have St. Julians, Sliema, Gżira, and Tashbix. So this is where most of the action is happening. You're going to have the main hotels in this area. You've got the Hilton, the Intercontinental, the Westin. You've got the capital. So obviously a lot is going on over there, entertainment-wise, in terms of restaurants, arts and culture, so on and so forth. And as you move in more inland from the coast, things tend to get a bit more quiet and more residential. So if you want to be in the heart of the action, but not completely having action happening outside your windows, in that case, you would want to maybe move up a bit further, possibly in places like Sweetie, which are just a few minutes away from the areas listed here. So a good place to start looking, the Central Harbour region, but it's not for everyone. And this will take us to the next slide, where we're going to take a look at the south of Malta. Now, just wait for the slide. So the south of Malta, as you can see, technically it's not too far from the region we're looking at. However, the differences are quite major. So in the south of Malta, you can expect to visit certain more traditional villages, such as Marsa Shlock, which is a fishing village. The south of Malta, there's also developments like smart cities. So there is also prime SDA developments being constructed in the south of Malta. But in terms of the lifestyle and the general feeling, it's a bit more slow-paced. You can get to nature and you know, a beach which might not be as commercialized, much easier. This is much more easier to experience in the south of Malta. So if you do want to have some restaurants nearby, be able to go for a walk by the marina and also enjoy some nice views, but not be in the heart of all the touristic attractions, then possibly the south of Malta could be an option for you. Now, the next slide is going to take us to the northern region of the mainland, and here what we have similar, I would say, in a way, to the southern part of the island. Over here we have, again, I would say, as we have on this slide, you're going to experience more nature, beaches and views. So this is the part of Malta where you're going to find the sandy beaches, my favorite, such as Riviera and Golden Bay. You're going to have lovely views, which can be a combination of both country views and sea views together. Again, there's a lovely development there, which we'll get to, which has lovely views. It's breathtaking. And effectively, the good thing about being in the northern part of the island is because you're going to be even closer to Comino and Gozo. So if you do enjoy getting away, definitely the north of Malta is more quiet and more laid back and gives you better access to enjoying nature and those sandy beaches. It's also less developed, I would say, overall than the rest of the regions we covered. Now, in terms of Gozo, our sister island, Gozo has actually been making great movements in terms of development, both in terms of construction for residential property, as well as the restaurants, entertainment industry as well. So in fact, Gozo's property market specifically is setting records in terms of transactions and pricing at the moment. So Gozo could be considered as similar to Malta, most definitely. However, it's also less developed. So the total amount of construction that you have on the island and the amount of activity going on is going to be much less compared to being in the Central Harbour region, for example. Gozo is a place where you can relax, you can also enjoy good food, you've got nice attractions, and it's not as noisy or busy as the more populated or touristic regions of the rest of Malta. So definitely Gozo is an option. Getting to Gozo is also quite easy now because we have a fast ferry service from Valletta. There's an actual ferry service from the north of Malta to Valletta, which you can also, from north of Malta to Gozo, which is a passenger ferry with vehicles. So you could actually go up to Gozo with your vehicle from the northern part of Malta. And therefore, even if you were to land in Lua, which is towards the south of the island, and then get to Gozo, you could easily get there within a couple of hours from landing. So accessibility is not an issue. Okay, so we've covered the main 4 parts of the regions that you could look into in Malta that offer some prime investment opportunities. So we've got the Central Harbour, we've got the South, the North, and Gozo. Now, the next point is going to look at some actual properties that you could consider in these various regions. I must say that, moving on to disclaimer, that Malta's property market moves quite fast. And therefore, although we've done our best to find properties that offer availability and we have done our best to have the up-to-date pricing, should you be interested in any of these, we cannot actually confirm availability in advance or the pricing. But as soon as you contact us, we can get you that confirmation literally within the same day. So moving on. We'll start from, let's say, the most popular. So statistically, from clients' experience, it is true that most clients tend to opt for the Central Harbour region. So we have a few more properties in this region compared to others that we'll be presenting today. And to get an idea here, that tower, the white tower that you see on the slide, that's actually Mercury Tower. It's a project that was designed by the renowned architect Zaha Hadid before her passing. It's still in construction. The tower is now built, but the cladding and the final, basically the final parts of the construction are still in process. But that gives you a good idea. So if you want to get a prime 1-bedroom apartment in this area, so you have the Mercury Tower complex, you can start with a 1-bedroom as low as €315,000. I say as low because if you're going to look at the higher end, larger apartments in the tower, so if you're going to go for a higher floor and more bedrooms, then you're looking at something more, at least around €2.1 million. So this is a prime development. It's one of the most expensive probably in St. Julians at the moment. However, it is going to be the top development, at least for the next few years. So definitely interesting to take a look at. Now, moving on to the next development, again, we are still in the Central Harbour region. We are still in the village or city, if you want to call it, St. Julians. And this development is literally just across the road from the Zaha development. Over here, this development is already completed, so people are already living here. So we could either assist with getting a property directly from the developer if any units are remaining. If not, there's always something available on the secondary market. Based on some searches we've made, you could get a 1-bedroom starting at around €415,000. And here you could also expect this to be furnished, even though it's a bit more expensive than what we saw on the previous development. The good thing here is that if you go for a 3-bedroom, you're going to get much more value because that starts in the region of around €620,000. And that's going to be in Pender Gardens, also in St. Julians, also SDA. So fantastic location if you want an apartment for rental purposes. And if you want to live in it, it's also a great area. I personally live just a few minutes away from these developments in a locality called Sweetie. So I do recommend being in this part of Malta. Now, the next development that we have is again in the Central Harbour region, another very, very popular part of Malta, which is Sliema. So Sliema's got our largest shopping mall, which is Tinia Point. It's got 2 or 3 SDA developments that I can think of the top of my head. And the one we're looking at here is Fort Cambridge in Sliema, a development that is built just by a historical fort, thus the name Fort Cambridge. So a good amount of the apartments have direct views of this heritage site that is protected, followed after the heritage sites with open sea views, depending on which side of the development you are at. As you can see on the slide over there, you would also have the chance to get direct views of our capital, Valletta, which are also amazing views. In terms of the pricing here, again, a one bedroom, you're looking at something in the region around 500 or 480,000 euro. 3 bedrooms, then you're going to go a bit higher, so 850. And do keep in mind, though, that most likely this is going to come with a sea view or views of the heritage sites, and even possibly views of Valletta on the other side of the project. So also SDA, so definitely perfect for renting, because if you're going to put this on Airbnb, most tourists want to be in St. Julians or Sliema, because that's where the most of the entertainment and shopping is. So also interesting to take a look at. Now, having taken a look at the Central Harbour region, we're going to jump onto the southern part of Malta. I mentioned that there is a development, part of which is already constructed, or most of which a smart city. So in this development, you have not only residential properties, there's also some commercial properties with offices, and there's also a number of restaurants, some bars, you get gyms. So it's a perfect complex where you're going to have everything you need. So despite being away from, let's say, what's happening in St. Julians or Sliema, if you go for a property over here, it's going to be a bit more quiet, but at the same time, you're still going to be able to walk down the road for a few minutes and sit down and have lunch at a restaurant and enjoy some nice open sea views. So the shoreline in Smart City, the pricing, something in the region of a studio from around 260, 300,000. And then you're looking at a 3-bedroom apartment, which something in the region of around 1 million euro. Some or part of this complex is still in development. So it would be a good time to get in. As you may imagine, the property prices do tend to appreciate once the project is actually complete, and the apartments are also finished and furnished. So the shoreline is an SDA property. In terms of whether you would put this on the rental market on Airbnb, as I said, most tourists would probably want to be in the Central Harbour region. So let's say the demand for short rentals at the shoreline might not be as much as the demand for short rentals in St. Julians or Sliema. So that's a factor to consider. But at the same time, if you intend to spend time on it, in it yourself and use it as your residential property, then it's definitely a beautiful project that's being put together. So that's what we looked at the south. Now keep in mind, and this applies to all the different areas we're talking about, this is limiting to special designated area properties. So not all the properties in Malta look like the properties we are showing you here. It is possible to find small townhouses, to find other apartments, which might not obviously be sea view and more inland. And you could also find, let's say, a small villa with its pool, or an old townhouse that might need some work, or possibly even a farmhouse in Gozo, for example, or the south of Malta. So there are other unique properties that you could actually find and probably would not find anything like it anywhere else. So if you are looking at a property to live in, I do recommend reaching out to us, telling us what it is you like and what it is you're looking for, and then we can put together some options that might not be following the same style of special designated area properties, because it might look all very similar in terms of the design and construction. So after that note, we'll move now from the south of Malta. We're going to move to the northern part of the island, and the northern part is where we mentioned that you're going to get more nature, beaches and views. So the complex that we're looking at over there on the left image, that is Southridge in Mellieha. So Mellieha is towards the most northern part of the island, and it is an SDA property and development. So again, you can definitely rent it out and you don't need a permit to buy it. And there are a number of units available. It's been recently completed. And again, the image on the right attempts to give an indication of those views, but I can say that it does not do as much justice as it should, because the views that you will see obviously towards the horizon, you have full country views, and then you've got sea views, and you definitely enjoy watching a nice sunset or sunrise on your terrace or potentially penthouse. They do have penthouses with a roof terrace, so you have a pool on the top of your penthouse as well, and you can enjoy having your family barbecues or friends over. So the price is over here. We're looking at a 3-bedroom that starts at around 430,000. And then if you're going to go for the penthouses, you're going to have something starting in the region of 750,000 euro and upwards. Again, slight variations depending on the bedrooms and the size of the unit that you choose to go for. And these will be finished, so you, if I'm not mistaken, also have bathrooms included and potentially even the doors, but again, we'll check these for you if you're interested. And the benefit here is that since the properties are normally unfurnished when you buy in this type of SDA property, that will give you the freedom and liberty to furnish and finish the property in terms of design more towards your liking than the developer who would have designed the project. So you do have that freedom. Now, the last area that we mentioned in terms of the regions is the sister island of Gozo. So here you could expect more of a rural and seaside village life. This, in fact, is the Kempinski residences in Gozo. So it's a mixture of hotel, service apartments, pools, there's some restaurants and also a bar on the complex site. So at the same time, it is completely set in a countryside area. So once you exit the complex, you can basically go for a walk and a hike and just enjoy the views and fresh air and nature. So this is where you want to be if you'd like to be a bit more cut off and enjoy the peace and quiet that you can find in Gozo. In terms of pricing, if you look at the Kempinski residences, it's a 1-bedroom would start at something around 480, 500,000. And then if you're going for a 3-bedroom, these are something in the region of 660, 700,000 euro, give or take. So the Kempinski development is one of the older projects that we've shown. However, you can't really get what you'd get in the Kempinski residences in any other of the developments that we've shown you. So this is quite unique in the sense of its location and how it's been put together. So I know it's been quite a dense amount of information and jumping from different areas around Malta with different types of properties. So I appreciate your following basically these different details. And in order to conclude, we are going to tackle some questions that have come through in the run-up to the webinar. So a very common question that we get from people who are interested in moving to Malta is, what if I rent before I purchase a property? Definitely, I mean, a lot of individuals tend to start off with a rental, be it a short rental or starting off with a few months or 1 year. And this will allow to get a feel of the property market and see exactly what suits you best in comparison to what Malta and Gozo offer. So yes, if you want to rent, by all means, obviously from economical perspective, once you're renting, it's a sunk cost. And at the moment, there is a possibility that we'll see a slight decline in the prices of the property market. So it might be a good time to get in over the next months or year or two. The other question we have is, and I touched on this briefly, what if I don't want an SDA property? What if I want an old townhouse or a small villa with a pool? By all means, it's definitely an option and you can purchase such a property. However, the likelihood is that it will be in a non-SDA area, therefore you need a permit, and thus you would need it to buy it, to live in it, and not to rent it out. But yes, you can find some beautiful one-of-a-kind properties in Malta, and I'm sure you will be able to find something you like. Now, if you do go for a unique property that might require, let's say, it might have a pool or you'd have your own private garden. One of the questions that we had is what if you need assistance to get people to or companies to service the pool, service the garden, or possibly also redesign the property or refurbish aspects of it. Can we help? Of course, I mean, we do a lot of work with our clients in terms of their property location. So we have a number of suppliers, service providers, architects, notaries that we can introduce to. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's up to the purchaser or the client to make a determination. But yes, by all means, if you want any information or suggestions, we are able to assist and guide you. Now, a question which is not as positive, but is a very valid question. What if the purchaser is applying under one of the Malta's immigration programs and for any reason gets rejected and therefore will not obtain the residence permit for Malta, or will not be accepted to be eligible as a Maltese citizen? In that case, what we do and what we can suggest when signing the promise of sale, and this has been done, we would request with the owner, the seller, to insert a clause into the promise of sale, amongst other subjective conditions, that if the purchaser's application for under the respective program for any reason is not approved, in that case, the promise of sale will effectively be terminated. The deposit paid by the purchaser will be paid back to the purchaser, and the provisional tax paid by the purchaser will also be refunded. So yes, if you're looking at property in parallel or being coupled with an investment migration program, you can do that, and that is what most clients do, and you can protect your investment by inserting that clause just in case things do not work out. So yes, and obviously we do strive to, as much as possible, to ensure that our clients' applications are accepted. So hopefully this will not even be a concern that you will have to face. Now, the last question that actually came through once we had started the webinar is in relation to whether somebody needs to be present for the signing of the promise of sale, the signing of the final deed. Technically, you don't have to be present. I did mention this briefly. If you wish, you do have the opportunity to appoint somebody to act as your representative, and that person can be at the promise of sale meeting or at the final deed meeting and sign on your behalf with a power of attorney. So we will communicate with the notary. The notary will assist you with the relevant requirements to appoint that person to represent you. So if you do require this service, again, this is something that is available and can be offered upon request. So really and truly, I mean, I think I hope that despite the condensed nature of this webinar, I hope it's given you a good overview of and set some questions in your mind and ideas about what you might be interested in. And after you've had some thoughts, please do reach out through the details that you have available on the slide. And Zenturo will be more than happy to assist with the information and also rope me in whenever necessary as well. So it will be a pleasure to assist directly as well from my end, and I do look forward to hearing from you. I'll leave it to Anna to conclude now, as always I've run over time. So thanks for your time and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions about what we have covered today, or if you just want to get some additional information, please visit our website at malta-citizenship.info. We also have our YouTube channel where you have several videos about the immigration programs in Malta. Just search for Zenturo Limited on YouTube and you will find us. And if you would like to book a consultation, please use the link on the screen, which is malta-citizenship.info/consultation. And of course, if you can always reach us in our email on Zenturo on service@zenturo.com. Thank you again and have a good day.